everybody, I'm Sarah and I'm a recorder player. Okay, are you ready for this? Am I ready for this? I think I'm ready for this. Today's video is all about tuning. Today I'm gonna go into the theory behind tuning and how this is actually going to be used for you practically, whether you're tuning with a recorder group, with a piano, or with a harpsichord, because it's going to be different. Everything I talk about in this video can be found much more in depth online, so if I mention something and you think that's interesting, just go and Google it. And if I explain something in a bit of a weird way, please don't yell at me, because this is so much information to condense down and impart upon you, so bear with me. So, tuning. Basically making sure the notes that you play are high or low enough. Yes, you're playing an A, but it could be slightly higher or lower, and that's called being in tune. First, some basics. With the recorder, the harder you blow, the higher or the sharper it's going to get. Sharp is high, flat is low. You can also influence the tuning. If you're really too sharp all the time, you can pull your recorder out slightly. If you think you're too low, push your recorder in and make sure it's nice and warm. Warm it under your armpit first. The warmer your instrument it is, the higher it's going to sound. So if you're playing in a cold hall or something and you can tell you're too low, just take some time to warm your recorder up and blow nice and confidently. Already knowing these few things can really help all of your tuning. And now we're going to go into the theory. So even if the whole next part of this video is just like, for you, hopefully at least you've learned something. So, two notes sound in tune when they have a kind of still, settled quality. You can hear if something is out of tune because it's kind of buzzing or grating. This is because sound is made of sound waves, they go up and down. The amount of times this happens per second is called the frequency, and that determines the pitch, how high or low a note is. Now, the relationships between these frequencies is actually very important. In an octave, the higher note is exactly double the frequency of the lower note. The ratio is 2 to 1. That means those two sound waves fit exactly into each other. It's very simple maths, it looks beautiful, and it sounds For this reason, we always want our octaves to be beautifully in tune. Now with these sound waves, the simpler the maths, the more beautiful our ears perceive it. So with a fifth, 5 notes apart, the ratio of those frequencies is 2 to 3. Simple. A fourth, the ratio is 3 to 4. A major third, the ratio is 4 to 5, and so on. Now, here's the annoying and tricky part. It's actually physically impossible for all notes to all be in tune all the time. How to explain this? For example, if you make a perfect third, C to E, then a third, E to G sharp, then a third, G sharp to C, the resulting C to C is way too wide. Now for a detailed explanation of why, please consult Google, but basically there's always going to be a discrepancy. And this discrepancy, the amount that your music is out of tune, we refer to as the comma. Now, throughout history and all the way back to the ancient Greeks, the question has been in music how to solve this problem of the comma. What we do today is we take that comma and distribute it equally over the 12 semitones in a scale, so that every semitone is the same distance apart. This is called equal temperament, and it's how your piano is tuned. The bad news is this does in no way fit with physics. Your octave is great, your fifths, which are very important, are slightly narrow, and your thirds are awful. They're really wide. Not only are basically all of your intervals out of tune, it's the same all over the whole piano. You can tell that I don't really like equal temperament very much. If we go a bit further back in time to the Baroque, they would use movable or circulating tuning. So they would basically take some important keys, C, F, G, D, and make them very in tune. And the further away, weirder keys like F sharp, they would put all of the out of tuneness there. So it was like, okay, you're playing in your home key, everything sounds beautiful, you modulate to that weird key and suddenly, but composers would actually use this. This would heighten the drama and the tension. You could be in a beautiful key and suddenly you'd have this weird chord and it would be out of tune, but that would be purposely used to create this. That is something we just don't have today in equal temperament. So when we hear harpsichord pieces played on a piano today, a lot of it is missing. So if we go further back into the Renaissance, music was written differently then. It wasn't so much about modulating and drama, it would be more about beauty. So they would often use a tuning system called mean tone. In mean tone, it was the thirds that were made to be pure and in tune, very beautiful. The fifths were slightly narrow, but you know, we could live with that. But this comma had to go somewhere, so there would be 1/5 in the scale that was extremely out of tune, and this was called the wolf. However, this meant that out of the 12 possible keys, only 8 were usable, and the other 4 that contained the wolf were out of bounds. And if we go even further back, way back to the ancient Greeks, we had Pythagorean tuning, and here the fourths and the fifths were kept in tune. The thirds were way too wide, but that was kind of okay then because they saw the third as a dissonance, which it was because it was out of tune. And all of this is a big generalization. Of course, there are so many other different tuning systems. It's just really interesting to know a few of the points of how this whole question of the comma was solved. And of course, all of this is referring to instruments with fixed pitch, a piano or a harpsichord or a harp, when you tune it and then it can't move anymore. But a recorder is flexible. Like the human voice, we can hit every single degree of the scale. That means we can tune, in theory, everything to be perfect. We can play in pure tuning all the time, because as we go through the piece, things will be shifting ever so slightly depending on the context. Unsurprisingly, this requires that you have very good ears, not only to recognise if you're in tune, but to react upon that. So, how do we do that? Alright, into the next step. Are you still all with me? Step 2 is actually being able to hear if you're in tune or not. You would think the simplest way is to play the same note and then to hear if it's the same. So let's try that. I was adjusting it then, so sometimes it was going grrr and sometimes it was ah. An exciting piece of nerdy theory, this grating or beating that you hear when it's out of tune, the amount of beats per second is the amount of cents you are out of tune. So if you hear 3 wah, 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 per second, you are 3 cents out of tune. Is that helpful? I don't know, but it's interesting. And if you hear this completely still, pure sound, then it's exactly in tune. But actually, I've got a better way for you. It seems a bit more complex at first, but it's going to make sure that you can be much more accurate and have a more beautiful sound when you're tuning. And that is using difference tones. So basically, when you play any two notes at the same time, those sound waves mingle, the frequencies mingle with each other, and it actually creates extra tones in the air. And these we call difference tones. Sometimes they're called tartini tones as well, I think, after the guy that kind of found them out. Let's see if we can hear some. If I keep one the same and I shift the other, you're probably able to hear the difference tone moving too. And actually in recorder consorts, we tune by playing an interval and then we listen to the difference tone, hearing if that is in tune. Because what it does, it creates a beautiful chord, and it's actually easier to hear if that whole chord is in tune than two unison notes. Little bit of theory, the difference tone, what is that? Well, you take the frequency of the higher note and subtract from that the frequency of the lower note, and the resulting frequency is the difference tone that you hear. Of course, this means that every different interval you play will give a different difference tone. Playing an octave will sound different from a fifth than from a minor third. Not to worry, in the description there is a handy link to a PDF that I found on Google where you can see an actual chart of, okay, I play a fifth and I should expect to hear this note. I play a fourth and I should expect to hear this note. That could be a handy resource for you. How can you practically use this in your playing? The first thing to do is train yourself to hear these difference tones. You might not hear them from the start, and that's okay. The best thing you can do is find a friend who also plays the recorder to get together with, because yeah, it's more fun to do it with two people. But I actually just found on YouTube an A that you could use to play along with. Or if you have a tuner, often they have a button that plays a note. And I would get to grips with difference tones using a fifth. And in your pairs, have one of you being fixed and the other one being movable. So one of you plays, and with the other one moving around, blowing more and less, you should be able to hear the difference tone going. And experiment with fifths, with fourths, with thirds. And when you can hear this difference tone and you feel like, there it's in tune, they all fit with each other, try and hit it dead on. Like 1, 2, play. 1, 2, play. So you're really building these reflexes and you're building an oral memory of how it should be sounding. If all of this is sounding extremely complicated to you and you're thinking, I don't even know if I'm too high or too low, don't worry. Let's address that. This system of having one person fixed, one person moving is really important with tuning, because then you know where you'll stand. If you're both moving around, then you're never going to find each other. And of course, if you're playing with a fixed instrument like a piano, they can't move. So you have to be able to be flexible and find your tune home. So if you're the moving person, don't be afraid to go really high and really low as you zone in on that in tune note. And once you find it, try and stop and start to hit it each time. Of course, I'm playing on my own here, so I'm just acting it. I'm going to take you a step further. How is this useful if you're playing in a recorder group? Well, difference tones are really important when you're tuning chords. And when you tune a chord, it's important to go through a system. If everyone just plays and is moving up and down thinking, am I in tune, then it's just going to give you a headache. First, establish your octaves, everyone who is playing the same note, and get them to begin, and make sure you get that in tune first, otherwise you can't go anywhere. And what we're listening for here is the beating in the air. If you hear this grating, this then it's not in tune. So you want everyone to be playing the same note. And it helps to work from the bottom up, that the basses start and then the higher notes come in afterwards and tune to the bass. Next, we're going to put in our fifths, and the fifths are actually a little bit higher than what you're used to at the piano. So once I was in a masterclass by Paul Lanehouse, and he said, imagine the fifth as a seagull flying over the ocean. Da! So it has movement, it's going somewhere. And only when your octaves and fifths are good are we going to put in our thirds. Now, major thirds are actually a lot lower than we expect from the piano. So they're nice and relaxed. Da, da, do. So there, you know where you stand. Octaves are pure. Fifths are nice and high and fast. Major thirds are relaxed and low. And minor thirds, they can be a little bit up. It's so important if you play with a recorder group to really spend time on this. Recorders are flexible instruments. It's not like you can all just play an A and be like, right, we're good to go. I'm not exaggerating when I say with my trio, we spent months and months just playing chords together, because it's so important to develop your ears, develop your sound, not only understand how you are in relation to the other players, but how your instrument is, because not all recorders are tuned equally. So really spend some time tuning a chord of G, G's and D's, G's and D's, G's and D's, and then move to A's and D's, A's and D's, then A's and E's, or whatever is useful for the piece you're playing. But try and build up this grid in your mind of how it feels to play those chords and how it sounds. So you're using the muscle memory of your body, how you're blowing, together with your ears. Okay, very good, but how is it if you're playing with a fixed instrument like a harpsichord or a piano? Your piano is in equal temperament. So actually a lot of the intervals you'll be playing are not pure intervals. Your difference tones will not be beautiful. It's a different approach. For this reason, I actually find it quite difficult to play with piano because I've spent so much time doing consort playing. The important thing with the piano is not to think, I'll just tune my A and then I'm good to go. No, because not all recorders are tuned exactly in equal temperament. In the same way, it's worth spending some time with your piano player, building up this same grid. Ask them to play fifths, open fifths. For example, all C's and G's, C's and G's. Don't let them play thirds because they're horrifically out of tune anyway. But as they play their C's and G's, tune all your C's with them and try and go note by note and feel how it is to play that note so it's in tune with the piano, and remember how that feels. And you'll actually notice things like, oh okay, I have to play my E's quite high, but then I have to relax quite a lot on my B's, for example. And once you can remember these things, then you've built up a reference system of how it feels to play this recorder with that piano. And don't be afraid to really spend some time. If you have a very classical piano player, they might be looking at you like, why is this important? But they don't understand. It's okay. Stand your ground. Again, it's about arming yourself with the knowledge and using your reflexes to adjust to it. With a harpsichord, the process is actually quite similar. It's important to spend some time tuning all different notes of your recorder with all different chords. It's just that the harpsichord could be tuned in a different system than equal temperament. So make sure to ask. And if you don't really understand that answer, ask them. Say, oh, okay, does that mean that how are the thirds then? Are they low or high? How are the fifths? Are some notes different? All of this stuff is really complicated and it's always fine to ask for help. I have 2 tips to leave you with. One is that, is it helpful to use a tuner? A tuner is a device where you play a note and it will have a little dial telling you if you're too high or too low. If you're playing with other recorder players, actually I think they're pretty pointless. I think it's much much better to train your ears and be able to trust those and rely on them than what some machine is telling you. If you are going in to play with a lot of modern instruments that do tune to a tuner, it can be helpful to know if you're too high or too low in general, but that's about it. After that, I would again use your ears rather than a tuner. What you should not do is play your piece watching a tuner trying to make every single note go into the green. That is not going to help you for all of the reasons I've already talked about. And my last tip, I know from personal experience, if you're playing in a group and you're worried you're out of tune, please don't blow less. I used to do this all the time. I wouldn't know if I was in tune, so I'd play really softly so that no one would hear me, but that would actually make me really, really flat and even more out of tune. The best thing you can actually do is play nice and strongly and give a confident sound, and often that kind of solves the problem itself. And if you're really thinking, oh God, this still sounds terrible, even when you're playing confidently, it's fine to say, hey, can we just take a second to tune this chord? I'm not entirely sure where I am. No one is going to think bad of you. Oh my gosh. I think you're probably all just sitting there like, tuning is such a huge and such an interesting subject. Please, if any of you have interesting links, resources, articles, share them in the comments below. Tuning, and it doesn't have to happen overnight. I developed an ear for tuning through many, many years of playing. So this is just your first step into the journey. And if you have been doing tuning stuff for a long time already, hopefully this gave you some more in-depth knowledge, but it can also show you the recorder is not an easy instrument. Well, I'm gonna end this here. Team Recorder, as always, you can subscribe to my channel by clicking on my face down here. Up here, I'm giving a link to my Patreon account where you can choose to support the channel with a small donation every month and you get great rewards. And up here, I'm leaving a link to last week's video, which is the much more sedate how to play the notes on the recorder. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.